I don't know why I always pick to do these things in winter, but here we are, undisclosed location, and we are going to do a maximum point blank range on a 300 blackout pistol. Why are we going to do that? On forums and pages and stuff, probably the most frequently asked thing that I see is, what range should I zero my gun at? And if it's zeroed at given 50, whatever, how much will it drop at 100? My answer is always go shoot and find out. And I don't mean to be snarky when I say that, but literally there's too many variables with the 300 blackout. You have all different bullet ranges from 100 grain going 2400 feet per second to a 200 grain, 220 grain going 1050 or even slower if you want. Point being, everything in this, it's so versatile, but everything's a variable. The barrel length is a variable, the optic and the optic's distance from the bore to the sight is a variable, suppressed, unsuppressed, again, cartridge, bullet weight, whatever, hand loads, factory loads, whatever. But so we're going to do this test with the most commonly used hunting load, and we're going to base it off of a hunting scenario. So we're doing a 110 grain bullet, doing about 2,300 feet per second, or we'll find out exactly what. And we're going to find out what our maximum point blank range is, so that if you're using, say, a red dot or something like that, you can hold straight on a target and you can hit, in this given example, an 8-inch plate. Okay, 8-inch vital is pretty common with most deer and big game. So we're going to use that as an example. I'm going to switch this optic out to a scope, and we're going to figure out what we want to actually sight this rifle in at, and then we'll come back with all the results and we'll come to a conclusion. Elephant in the room. Andy, why do you have this giant scope on this gun? So what I'm trying to do is, I've got this gun set up unlike it would normally be set up, but I'm doing it specifically for this test to take out any variables. I'm off of a nice bipod, it's an Atlas 5H, and bag in the back. I've got a brass catcher on because I hate chasing brass in the snow, and then I'm using a 5 to 25 by 56 scope. For mostly just to take out the sight part of it. Okay, so now I know that when I'm holding on, I'm getting a good shot, and then when we're done with this test, we'll zero our red dot in at the actual distance that we determine. All right, so we're going to start out at 25 yards. At the same time, I am going to shoot past the lab radar. It's nice to get an actual muzzle velocity. So this stuff's always published, right? And this particular ammo is published at 2375, which is great. But your barrel length is going to affect that. A lot of things are going to affect that. The weather's going to affect that. So it's nice to have just a baseline to work off of, and then we can make a correction if we want inside of a ballistic app. So we're going to shoot the target at 25 and simultaneously get us velocity. Okay, and case in point, 2194. So almost 200 feet per second, 180 feet per second slower than the published velocity. So more than likely that's published off of like a 16-inch barrel, possibly even longer, I'd have to look. But see, that throws everything off. You put that in a ballistic calculator and with the wrong velocity, and everything's going to be off from there. So I'm probably going to shoot once or twice more just to get a 3-shot standard deviation on that, to get a good average. And then we're going to move the target out to 50. All right, so we're going to be at an average of 2213. Standard deviation of the 3 of 17.5, which is pretty standard for factory ammo. But case in point, we're like 150 feet per second slow compared to what we should be off the box. So keep that in mind. Okay, now we've moved the target back to 50 yards. Okay, now we're back to 75 yards. All right, we got the target moved back to 100 now. All right, the stuff that I do for science, 150 yards. It's about as far as we're gonna get it out today. Unfortunately, with the snow, it's just too tough. This is gonna suck bad enough as it is, so 150 yards. I'm gonna shoot twice just because.
All right.
I don't know if this is gonna work, but got a plate at 150 yards over there too. It's a 10-inch plate, so we'll try to see if we can tag that too. So, just to be clear, we're zeroed approximately somewhere between 30 and 50 yards right now. Not really important, and we'll show you why once we get on paper. But the point being is 300 blackout, 150 yards. I'm zeroed at 50, and I just tagged the 10-inch plate offhand at 150 yards, no problem, okay? So this will all make sense once we get done here. Okay, here we go again. We got the metal plate. We're walking back to the target. Metal plate's at about 60 yards right now. Point proven. All right, so after all that, what have we learned? Well, I can tell you right now that I'm going to zero my rifle at 210 yards. All right, so before you leave my video here, let me explain to you why that is or what I mean. So if I'm telling you the truth, I did a little bit of cheating here. I use an app called Strelock Pro, and I also use Applied Ballistics, but Strelock Pro is really probably the easiest one to generate a new ballistic profile for something quick at the range or otherwise. Basically, if you know the round, if you know the ballistic coefficient and the muzzle velocity, or in this case, all I did is simply went into their database and plugged in the 110 grain load that we were playing with here. And that's in their database. A ton of them are. It's good enough to get you close, okay? And you can tune it from there. But little background, I've been shooting long range for about 20 years. A little bit of F-class, a little bit of competition, and then I hold a shoot that it's called the Wisconsin Mile, and it's a shoot where just for fun basically, but people a chance to shoot a mile, and I own the target set and all that for that. So I'm kind of into the precision thing. So honestly, 300 Blackout was a little bit of a departure for me, but it's been so much fun with all the different variety of ammo that you can load for it and buy and otherwise. So it's really been fun, and this is a really unique thing here that I wanted to show you guys, because if you look at the box of ammo, for example, on the Barnes TAC TX box here, 110 grain, it shows a 0 at 100 yards, and at 200 yards it shows a 7.8 drop and 7.8 inch drop, and at 300 yards a 29-inch drop. And so you look at a 300 Blackout and you think, ballistically, I'm used to shooting a high BC Magnum where I'm trying to laser beam that thing as far as I can, as flat as I can, and this thing's literally throwing a rock. And it is not the most ballistically advanced cartridge, I understand that, but with a little bit of manipulation of your 0, you can really make this rifle really very versatile, especially if you're just shooting steel, mostly like me. Maybe you're going to deer hunt. So what I'm trying to do with this video, I'm not trying to convince you that you should go try to shoot a deer at 200 or 100 yards or plus or anything like that. I'm just saying that we can 0 it to be as versatile as we can, and you're going to ring steel at a lot of given distances. So anyway, so I put it into the ballistic calculator and I messed around a little bit with the 0, and I found that 36 yards was what I was going to 0 this rifle at, okay? And that was a guess, but I was trying to just get a decent example for this whole scenario. So I 0'd the rifle 36 yards here, okay? And then we moved the target up to 25 yards, and what the chart, and I'm going to compare the chart compared to what we saw, and I want to preface that by saying, you know, this is a 10.5-inch barrel, 300 Blackout, not known for their accuracy by any means, probably an 1.5 to 2-inch gun. So although my wind held very good, I can't 100% say that these are going to land. If I was going to actually use this round as a round that I shot more frequently, one of my reloading recipes, I would do this with 3 shots at each distance, or even, you know, multiple targets, and just log it over multiple targets and then overlap the data, okay? So 3-shot group would give you a good average. This was what I had left from deer hunting season, and I just wanted to make a video on it, so I had enough ammo to do this, okay? So we brought the target up to 25 yards. Now realistically, it shows adjustment of 2.1 low with this given 0. 2.1 low at 25 yards is only just a fuzz over a 1/2 inch, okay? 1/2 inch low. So you think, well, what difference does it make, Andy? If I 0 it at 25, I 0 it at 36, or I 0 it at 50, what difference does it make? They're all within a couple inches. Well, the difference is that's, if you look at the travel of a football, this is on the first time that it crosses that plane, okay? If you call 0 a plane, that's the first time that this crosses this plane. And by manipulating that up front, or at least, you know, knowing where it's going to be on both ends of it, you can really tune this thing to do a lot more. So 25 low to 50 high, you've got quite a difference. You got about 3 inches difference, but that's at that given range, it's a huge difference, okay? And it makes a huge difference on the backside. So we're low at 25, we move the target out to 50, and we end up being just about 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 5/8 high, okay? And that is a little bit higher than it showed on the chart, but you get a pretty good idea, okay? Then we move the target out to 75 yards, and now we're looking at it's about 5 inches high, okay? So the chart shows 3.6 minutes high at 75 yards. Figure 75% of that, we're looking at just about 3 inches high. So this did end up being a little bit higher than it showed, but again, we got a 2-minute gun, and that could be a lot of different variables. Then we move the target out to 100 yards. Now it actually shows on my chart to be the same amount of minutes of angle adjustment, but then multiply that by a full minute because of 100 yards, and now that would be a fuzz higher. So in this particular case, the 100 yard landed about 6.5, 6 3/4 of an inch high. Then we move the target out to 150, and as you saw, I was no longer shooting off of a bench in a bag. I was laying in the snow, and I've got a million excuses as to why I didn't have a very good shot there, but it just didn't feel comfortable. So my first shot here ended up 8 inches high, and at the time I figured I better just shoot another one because it didn't feel like a good shot, and I better at least get something on paper, or, you know, in this case actually both of them landed. The second one though came in about 1.75 inches high. So if you go off the chart at 150 yards, it calls for about 2.5 minutes high. So 2.5 times 1.5, you know, we're looking at more like about 4 inches high. So that should have landed somewhere right about the same region as the 75 here. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'm not going to take a whole lot. If you take the average of these, that would end up right in there as well. Okay, so take that for what it's worth. Point is if you really look at it here, so far everything we've got is in a 7-inch group. Okay, so that would be on an 8-inch plate. Okay, and that is the peak. Somewhere right in here between 150 and 150 yards is where the arc of that football comes. Okay, so this is going to be as high as it goes. Now as we start going out in distance, that's going to start coming back down. So we didn't shoot any further, but I can just tell you from what our chart says, it's calling for 1.5 minutes high at 175 yards, and then at 200 yards, now we're only 0.5 high. So if you look at a half a minute at 200 yards, we would be 1 inch high, right? So half a minute times 2 because of the distance, 1 inch high. So now at 200 yards, we're only 1 inch high, and it's coming back down. 225 yards, it calls for 0.6 low. Okay, so 6/10 or somewhere in there, 3/4 of a minute low. At 225 yards, we're looking at about 2 inches low, just a little bit less. Okay. So 225 yards, I would call that the maximum point blank range, okay? Because now we're going to start falling outside of our plate. So, and that's given at a 36-yard zero. So when I said I'm going to zero it at 30, well, 30 in this case would actually end up being just a little bit higher than this given experiment. But guess what? That's where that bullet crosses back over. So at 210 yards, we're going to have the same zero as at 30 yards, okay? Does that make sense? 250 yards now, 1.8 low. You multiply that, now we're well past the threshold. We're about 5 inches low and outside of that plate. So, but the point being that if we take this 150 for what it's worth, everything that we shot here would have landed on an 8-inch plate. Okay. Now, you can include those further distances out to 225 yards, and we would have put everything on an 8 to 10 inch plate, which is what we're trying to do. Hold dead on. You'd always think with my deer rifle, I zeroed at 100, and then at 200, it's 1.5 inches or 2 inches low. Well, yeah, you can actually manipulate this on your deer hunting rifle also. Where I sit deer hunting, I can see 400 yards. My gun sits, granted it's zeroed at 100, but I sit with the turret at 2, which puts my zero at 225, which means anything from where I'm sitting to the end of my field at 400 yards, I can hold on point blank range, dead on, and it's going to land in the vital zone of a deer. And I've proven that time and time again. So I hope that this helps a little bit, that you can see that all we're really doing is we're manipulating that path a little bit, okay? The bullet's still going to drop, but by zeroing a red dot or otherwise at the correct given distance, you're going to be able to absolutely be amazed at how well you can impact steel. Is there enough? Does this mean you should go shoot a deer at 150 yards? Absolutely not. Your energy is falling off fast. Can't stop anything with the energy. But if you need to put, it's good to know where the bullet's going to land. If you need to put something on target at a different distance, at least you can have confidence knowing that you know where your bullet lands. Is this the same exact outcome that you're going to get out of your rifle? No. Are you using a different load? Are you using a different length barrel? Are you know, there's a million factors. The distance from your bore to your scope, that's another factor. So realistically, just trying to open your guys' eyes up a little bit to the ballistics and how you can manipulate to have the most versatile out of your own rifle. So hopefully you guys like this video. Hopefully it makes sense. And we'll see you on the range.